with Scott Allen.
Hello, I am your host, Scott Allen, and this is Phronesis, Practical Wisdom for Leaders. If the topic is leadership, I'm in. I've spent more than 20 years in the field teaching, learning, writing, and questioning. When I'm not working on Phronesis, I travel, delivering keynotes, working with individuals and teams, and helping people from organizations across industries become better leaders. Want to learn more? Visit me at scottjallen.net. Phronesis offers a smart, fast-paced discussion about all things leadership. We explore relevant topics and incorporate practical tips to help you make a difference in how you lead and live. Listen Notes lists Phronesis in the top 3% of podcasts worldwide. Phronesis is the official podcast of the International Leadership Association. ILA brings together those who teach, study, and develop leadership, advancing leadership knowledge and practice for a better world. Learn more at ila-net.org. Finally, if you enjoy Phronesis, please subscribe to stay current on our weekly episodes. If you find an episode that resonates, please share it with your colleagues and friends. And if you want more content, subscribe to my newsletter, The Leader's Edge. The link is in the show notes. As always, thanks for listening. And now, here's today's show. Okay, everybody, welcome to the Phronesis podcast. Thank you for checking in. I'm excited for the conversation today. Throughout the last couple years, we have been engaging in this project of Phronesis. I've been learning, and today is no different. It's another opportunity for me to learn. I hope it's an opportunity for you to learn as well. We are going to be speaking with Michael Gothe, and he is an Agile organizational coach at CRISP in Stockholm, Sweden. He has 20 plus years of experience in building high-performance, team-based Agile organizations. He's worked with large multinationals, cultural organizations, as well as startup companies in the public sector and nonprofits. He's passionate about transforming businesses to become truly agile organizations that not only create fantastic value for customers, but are also an inspiring place for people to work. He also loves capturing the moment through photography. He lives close to nature outside of Stockholm, Sweden, and is a proud father of 3. Michael, you just mentioned you live on the edge of a national park in Sweden. My family loves national parks. Tell me a little bit about the national park that you're close to. What are some of the features that make it something special, sir?
Yes, so it's just south of Stockholm, Sweden, and so it's quite close to the city center. It's only 30 minutes by car from the actual center, but I live so nice. It's exactly where the kind of suburb ends and the big national park starts, and there's a lake system and it goes out to the sea. So it's the perfect combination of being very close to the city and also kind of in the nature. So yeah, spring is coming here now. So I sometimes even hear birds here. So sorry for that.
If listeners hear birds, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. I hope the next time we record, Michael, I will be in Sweden and we'll sit in the national park and listen to the birds in the background as we talk. Is that a deal?
Yeah, that would be nice.
Well, what do listeners need to know about you that wasn't necessarily in your bio? Is there anything else you'd like to share before we jump into this conversation around Agile and leadership?
Yeah, I work at the consultancy in Stockholm called CRISP. People call us kind of like an Agile boutique consultancy. So we don't kind of promote any specific framework or any flavor of Agile way of working, but we know it's everything is contextual. So you need to adopt and kind of work with where you are. So we're about 25 consultants together, and we all have a kind of big Agile heart. So we believe in that, but we have different specialties. So I focus more on leadership development, learning programs, and kind of building Agile organizations.
Well, I'm excited to learn about this space. I've had one other guest where we touched on the topic of Agile. I'm excited to venture into the conversation around Agile and leadership and education. So maybe bring listeners into the space of Agile. And as you mentioned, there's probably a number, just like anything else, a number of different approaches, theoretical frameworks. There's probably all kinds, but can you give us kind of a landscape of the topic? And then how does the topic of leadership fit in there?
Yeah, so first of all, just kind of frame Agile a bit. It goes back to an Agile manifesto that was created in 2001, so a little more than 20 years ago. And it came from the software industry. Some thinkers, thought leaders in Agile or software development were kind of fed up with a lot of failed IT and failed software projects. And the old view on software development was this engineering practice where you could plan everything up front. You thought you know exactly what you were going to develop. You created a plan. You expected people to follow the plan. And if people followed the plan and just did what they were told, they would kind of generate results. And you thought that those results were what was needed. And of course, nothing of that works in a complex environment.
No,
Yeah.
I mentioned to you that a guest speaker last night from Tesla, and he's an engineer. And he talked about even, the Model 3, like he said, we went way too far down the path before we even knew if some of these things were going to play out the way we thought they would.
Yeah. Yeah, we can come back to Tesla. I love Tesla. I have a Model Y now.
Oh, wonderful.
I follow it closely. So it's one of, I think, an Agile company, an Agile organization where actually, Tesla, they have so rapid innovation and learning and changing even in the hardware. So Agile comes from the software. And I think the software industry has been a bit ahead because there's a lot of complexity in software. Like, it's soft, so it's easy to change. So when you change something in a big system, you can cause a bug or something can happen. It's not predictable. The users, they don't know what they want until they kind of get something in their hands and they say, this doesn't work. I don't like this. Typically, you need a lot of people collaborating and people are unpredictable. So it's very complex. And I think this is what created the Agile manifesto, the Agile movement. But nowadays, we all live in this complex world, right? Agile came from software, but it's needed anywhere where you have a complexity, unknowns, where you need to innovate, having a more of a learn and adopt approach.
I love that. A learn and adopt approach. So let's talk about that and how that aligns with leadership, because a leader with a mindset of a learn and adopt approach, talk about that. How does that shift the way we think about the role of leading others, right?
Yeah, so for most leaders, they've had success in more of a traditional setting, right? So they created success, been successful, have a career, they accomplished fantastic results, but suddenly expertise and knowledge is not enough. To innovate, you can, by definition, you have to create something new, right? And when all this kind of is uncertain, the key to success is learning. And the biggest hindrance for learning is when you think you know. So thinking that you know stops learning, right? If you as a leader think you have all the answers, if you are the person can to know, or I had this success in my last company, this is how we should do it. Or if you think that you know what the users want or need or going to buy, and you tell the teams to develop this, typically it's like a 20% chance or less that will be successful. So as a leader, you first need to kind of shift from a know-it-all to a learn-it-all approach. I think that's a quote from Satya Nadella, the new Microsoft CEO. He kind of shifted Microsoft. He has an agile background, I think. So nowadays, Microsoft is very successful and the stock increase is correlates when he joined. So he started to work with like the growth mindset, learning approach, creating a learning organization, really creating an environment where people can be empowered, innovate and learn.
Sometimes when I'm doing some of my educational programming, I say something similar to how you've just framed this, because I love that, from a know-it-all to a learn-it-all. And I think at times when I'm working with leaders and I'm having conversations with leaders, some have an implicit leadership theory that the leader, quote unquote, is supposed to know everything, is supposed to make the decisions, is supposed to have the answers. And it can be somewhat comforting at times when I'm talking with individuals and groups and just even present the notion that, look, sometimes the leader is the individual who creates a space for the best questions to emerge so that we as a collective can design the next best experiment that we think has the most legs, not the command and control, know-it-all, Henry Ford,
Yeah.
this is how it's going to be, right?
Yeah, so exactly. And also kind of the notion of leader versus leadership.
Mm.
So seeing leadership as a function in the organization, that if you think about who's the leader, then everybody needs to lead, and people can lead in different areas. So someone have expertise in design, then they take initiative there. And someone has knowledge and authority in some other area, let them lead there. So you have this kind of shared leadership, working as a network, ideas will emerge.
And I love that mindset of working as a network, because I might, in moments, engage in the activity of leadership, but then I might step back and assume the follower role again.
Yeah.
I may have a formal position of authority. I may not have a formal position of authority. But to your point, if everyone has a mindset that they can bring their voice to the space, that they can themselves identify the questions we need to be asking and really, really noodling on based on what they're observing. Again, to your point, you create that network and you capture the knowledge of the system versus just a few. Because in those organizations where it's super hierarchical and I might be afraid to share what I see, or I might be afraid to ask certain questions. I wish we could visualize this, Michael, and maybe you've seen this somewhere, but I can almost visualize in my head the missed opportunities and what that looks like.
I mean, you can think of someone new joining a company and they say, oh, I have these ideas, and they can, oh, can we do this? Can we do that? And then, oh, no, we have tried that, or that doesn't work, or that's not allowed, or people get discouraged really quickly. So imagine the opposite, like you encourage ideas, new thinking, thoughts, really tapping into the collective intelligence. So if you assume that we have complex problems nowadays, right? There is things just to execute as well, for sure. But innovation, when it comes to innovation, new things, that's a complex challenge. And to solve complex challenges, the best to do that is humans kind of collaborating, interacting, taking different perspectives, coming up with new ideas. Everything that's kind of predictable, typically you can automate it. That you can do with software. You can kind of automate things. So we don't have to kind of spend our energy on that. But the complex things, at least until we have AI also solving that. But so far, for now, it's people that we can focus on those complex things, right? So that means that creating this learning environment is really key. So I think that for an agile leadership is, I don't think there's like a formal study of or body knowledge of agile leadership. I think it's about leading in complexity. So creating learning environments and leading in this complex and complexity.
We've got that this leader, the key to success is learning, that there's a humble curiosity that this individual is really focused on rather than knowing it all, learning it all. So there's a learning mindset. What other attributes does this individual with an agile mindset bring to the table as a person in a position of authority or as a leader? What are some other things that come to mind for you?
You can compare it also to the mission command, or how you lead in war, actually. So setting a clear commander's intent or direction for people to know which problem to solve, but not handing out problems or tasks or delegating like tasks, but setting an intention. So there's a direction. One key is not have a kind of too narrow goal, because that will change as well. You might discover that if you have too narrow goal, you will not be innovative. So it's rather that having an intention or direction, like we're going. Secondly is working with boundaries or constraints and the guides for how to do things. You could have some simple kind of boundaries of what not to do, basically. So that leaves out a much bigger solution space to be innovative and find out how to do things.
It's having a sense of our general direction that we're headed in, what we're moving towards, but not being so narrow that we miss potentially some very important data in the environment. We miss some very, very important clues or information that we have to be paying attention to, because we could be making some assumptions that are completely false. Mm-hmm. And as I understand it, there's in some ways a shorter time horizon that's going on. You mentioned in software, there's a famous documentary about a infamous Atari game. I think it was E.T. I don't know if you've seen this documentary about Atari and the game E.T. Did you ever see it?
No, I don't think I've seen the documentary. No.
Okay, it's a fascinating documentary. So I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But today you could Google it.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's one of the worst video games in history, and it's a whole documentary about how Atari completely failed at navigating this design of the game, and it was horrible. Allegedly, scores of them were buried. I think at one point in the documentary, they actually try and exhume all of these Atari cartridges. But it goes back to what you mentioned in the beginning, that it used to be that we're going to plan everything out and then just follow that exactly, and all kinds of problems are introduced. It balloons in cost. The timeline gets shot. And if there's some hard deadline, we end up releasing something that's just not good and not ready, right?
Yeah. And then we celebrate because we managed to ship on the date. That's kind of typical. People do that. I mean, one key to learning is feedback, right?
Yeah.
The shorter feedback cycles we have, the more quicker we can learn. Also, the quality of feedback is important.
Yeah.
So in Agile, you want to involve the customer in the feedback loop or the user. So it's not only having like a short delivery time towards some internal or some stakeholder, someone like a manager saying, okay, we should deliver this. And it helps if you do it in short cycles, because you might be able to track quality and things. But really, you should have cycles including the user and customer, so you get real user feedback, as far as possible, at least. In Agile, you really work with creating faster feedback loops and high quality feedback loops. You want to have both quantitative and qualitative data. So you measure, for example, how users are interacting with your product. And at the same time, you also need to do qualitative interviews to understand the needs and behaviors of your users. So you want to collect a lot of data to get insights to learn, so you can constantly tweak and adapt.
Let's go a little bit deeper on the importance of the quantitative and the qualitative, because I love that. In academia, there's this, I think, false dichotomy and this false debate about, the quality of either. And for me, it's more of a both and. It's more of a both and another way of understanding some type of phenomenon. And is either one correct or incorrect? I don't know, but it's probably going to give us a broader perspective. And is that kind of what we're getting at with Agile here?
Yes, so we want to have better quality data. Yeah, and it's quite interesting. Some companies, they say, oh, we don't need to talk with the users. We know everything about them because we monitor exactly how they interact on the app, what they do, and where they click, and how many like interactions. But you cannot know how they think and their needs and their reactions unless you talk with them, right?
Yes.
And some companies are on the other side, that they're really bad at measuring, but they just cannot talk with users, and often the most loudly or someone complaining, but that might not be representative for the users, and for sure it's not a representative for potential users or people who have already left your service.
Exactly.
And many companies do neither. Like they have some executive team, they come up with a brilliant idea and just tell people to develop this product, and then it fails on the market, but they never kind of did any research. Or
so how do you, as you think about the learning space, I mean, if these are kind of some of the core tenets of this agile mindset, the agile approach, where we are constantly learning, we are creating environments where we are asking the right questions, where we have a network effect of people feeling like they can contribute and voice what it is they see, where we're getting qualitative and quantitative feedback on shorter cycles from users and including them in the loop. Are there any other, real quick, before we go to the learning, are there any other kind of core elements when you think about leadership and Agile that come to mind for you?
I mean, one key is creating really empowered teams.
Okay. Yeah, that's essential, right? Because if I'm on a team and Michael, I don't feel like I can voice my authentic opinion or share what I see because you're going to think ill of me. You're going to dismiss I mean, essentially you've just shut down the whole process, right?
Yeah. So you need to have very little kind of power distance on the team,
Okay.
so that you can kind of, if there's a boss or manager, some expert, you tend to hold back. So you need to have really this creative space where each person's ideas can build on the others, etc. You can be you can question ideas and make it robust, better quality. First of all, having that kind of psychological safety and that space, but also with empowerment. I mean that the teams, first of all, team often in agile organizations, they're built on kind of teams. Teams are the building blocks. So, and then they are empowered to kind of solve problems. So you give teams problems to solve, or even objectives to reach, rather than just requirements, tasks, or solutions, because that's very limiting. Then you're not really using their creativity. It's not really engaging. It's not motivating. You become just doing a task.
We're thinking about creating that environment where there's psychological safety, where people truly feel empowered. We're giving you a general direction, not to mandating exactly how it has to be done, but saying, okay, you have these conversations, you learn, you chart a path forward and help us think through. And the team is a core element of all of that. Do you have leaders who are creating spaces where that dialogue can occur, where people's authentic voice can be brought to the table? Even if it's a dumb idea, I feel like I can share it so that we can potentially get to the best path forward, right? And it's unlikely one person has the answer, but it's about us coming to a shared sense of our next best experiment or our next path forward to learn.
Yeah, so it's less kind of leading people on one-on-one. It's much more coaching a team, looking at the organization as a system, and working with the culture.
Nice.
So we can take more of an integral approach or a holistic approach to the mindset, the thinking, but you also have to develop the culture. And as leaders, I think that is most important. If you work with the culture and create environment, and then also making sure that structures in the organization are kind of aligned with this or innovative culture. So, for example, if you reward individuals, but you say team is, and you try to create teams, but you have performance management, like focus on individuals, you recruit, for example, very individualistic people, not kind of team players, etc. If the structures don't go hand in hand with the culture, it could be, you'll not get the results, basically.
It's going to fail.
So that requires for leaders to be more kind of looking at systems, thinking a bit broader, wider, having more mature, so to say, leadership.
I love how you even brought in the notion of, I was speaking with a leader in an athletic team here, a professional athletic team here in the United States. And we were talking about leader development, and this individual is building and creating. And one thing we discussed was that are our efforts aligned with how we're recruiting, how we're orienting, how we're conducting performance management, our reward structures? To your point, is there a system in place that is helping whatever the initiative is live? Is there a culture and a structure that will create space for this to actually flourish? Because I imagine you've come across individuals who heard Agile and it's the latest fad, but then did very, very little to address those two elements, like you said, the culture and the structure, and even the mindset of the leaders and their managers. It's dead in the water. You're wasting money.
Yeah, I think this is the biggest problem for Agile at the moment, because there's so much kind of marketing, sales, and people selling Agile frameworks, tools, and processes. Like the first value of Agile when it was created was individuals and interactions of a process and tools. That was the kind of shift. But still, nowadays many just adopt the tools or adopt some process or buy a process, try to implement it, and actually they've just created a new structure on top of the old one. So you actually have created more bureaucracy.
Yes. And yet another flavor of the month failed program that
exactly
diminishes engagement and
so if you try to solve complex problems with more structure, that is the kind of knee-jerk reaction. Yeah, like if your leader manager thought, oh, this is chaotic, this is messy, we need to have a better process in place, and you try to put some more process on the complex problem, you only create more complexity because you had a complex problem from the beginning with the software, the users, and markets, competitors. Now you have a complex internal structure that make it even worse. And basically, after a while, you cannot get anything done unless you break all the rules. In Agile, as Agile leader, you want to remove like any kind of unnecessary process or structure and use it. I mean, where there is kind of predictability in some places, like or in production, etc., that's fine. But when you're innovating or problem solving, you need to have more structures for collaboration, basically.
Wow. Well, again, I love that visual of you're just adding to the complexity. And I wish we could visualize that, because imagine a visual of that, and imagine a Fortune 500 company and the different layers, or a government, right?
Yeah.
Just, I'm seeing a thick, crusty layer on top of that creates a hard shell that just makes it impossible, right?
I was talking with a leadership team about this some time ago, and then the team leader said, I have just approved that we went from like 14 to 35 quality controls. Maybe it doesn't help the quality.
It might, but it might not. And to your point, that systems thinking, are we seeing that? And are we seeing the complexity in the system and addressing that opportunity or that challenge with the right tools?
Yeah. So the thing is that if you feel uncertain in the complexity, you might go for like simple solutions or expert solutions, or I can manage this. Oh, you just need this role to fix it. We have a problem here in the quality. let's introduce a quality coordinator. And then there's another problem. Oh, we need someone to coordinate this. So basically you get bogged down by just coordinating. And what happens is that if I go to many companies, you try to organize a meeting, right? Then everyone is super busy at work.
Yeah.
So when can we meet? Oh, in 2 weeks. Okay, so I get these people together, and now we're going to solve this complex problem. But it's not enough with us with two perspectives. We need to involve someone else. Okay, now we're going to have a meeting with 3 people. When can we find the time in our agenda? That's 3 weeks away.
Yes.
Okay, we meet in 3 weeks. We try to solve these complex problems, and we see that, we need to involve another. Of course, then it's 4 weeks away. And while we're waiting for all this, we'll start with something else. I'll do something here, and they say, this is complex. I need to talk with that person. But since everyone is busy and you're trying to solve complex problems through coordination rather than collaboration, you're just causing this kind of snowballing effect of everybody gets super busy, nothing gets done.
Yeah.
So imagine instead that you don't have any synchronization meetings, you only have work meetings where you actually come together, solve complex problems, you kind of mob and swarm around them, solve them. But this requires that you have basically the same priority so that people's agendas are kind of freed. You all work on the most important topic at all times. And then you can create really, really, really fast kind of speed and innovation.
Well, it's interesting. There's a quote, and I'm not going to get it correctly, but we found the enemy and it is us.
Yeah. So I think now that, Agile comes from software. I think software development have a bit more of intuitive understanding of complexity, because they've been struggling with these software systems for so long. So this is my hypothesis, that they have this intuitive, they become quite good leaders because they have this sense of handling complexity. But nowadays, complexity is everywhere. So it's a big shift for leaders that have been successful in a more predictable world. So how do they now kind of shift to leading complexity? And I think even if you understand the shift, you're so used to the old paradigm that you often fall back to kind of simple, quick fixes, actions.
And that's probably where some of the work that you do, coaching others, helping them see some of this. And I imagine being someone who's a step removed, you can see some of that a little more clearly than someone who's in the basement, so to speak, as my friend June Ryan says, that you're stuck in the basement and you got to get out, and you can look at it from a different point of view.
It's perfect with the combination with someone internal that knows the context, understand everything. I have a huge respect for every company, every situation is different. So all their context is kind of complex. So that's why you cannot just take a predefined solution and install it.
No.
And this is what people sell, but that's another kind of failure. So, but getting the outside perspective is like in sports. Yes, it's difficult to see yourself perform. Mm-hmm. But the best athletes have the best coaches. So getting the outside perspective as well, like another perspective, and then you can see, well, how can you think here? Or these are some risks, or if you try this might happen, but you don't know. But trying to kind of create safe to fail experiments to move forward.
I love that phrasing, safe to fail experiments.
Yes.
That might be the title of this episode, safe to fail experiments. I love it. Yeah,
Agile is a risk minimizing kind of approach because you want to learn as fast as possible with as little investment as possible.
Yep.
And also you want to start with the biggest assumption, the biggest risks. So where do we need to learn the most? And you start there.
Last little line of questioning that I'd just love to get your insights on, and then we'll kind of wind down for the day. Embedded in this methodology and embedded in learning is failure.
Yeah.
So how do we prepare the leaders for some of that failure? Because we've been conditioned, or many have been conditioned. I mean, that's a mindset shift as well, that we're going to fail. But again, your phrasing kind of piqued that in my interest, because failure is embedded in this work.
Yeah, maybe I am trained as a coach, and then the mantra is there are no kind of failures, just learning opportunities.
Yeah.
Some failures are kind of stupid that we should avoid them, of course, that could be foreseen. But when there's really complexity, we have hypotheses, then we can create an experiment to try it out. If we know that we're going to succeed, it's not an experiment, right? We don't learn anything.
Yep.
So it's not learning. So we should frame the activities as a learning experience. And you can learn. The best Agile teams, they make so cheap kind of tests, investments, or prototypes, mock-ups that you can learn in a day or two a lot. More traditional organizations, they say, okay, we'll develop this product for like 4 months more, ship it, then say, oh, it failed. Good Agile teams would know that in a week that this will not fly. We try something else.
That's a wonderful way of thinking. What are a couple resources we can share with listeners that you have found useful? Maybe someone who's very new to this topic, and maybe someone who's somewhat advanced in the topic. Are there a couple of resources that come to mind for you?
At crisp.se, we have a really popular blog.
Okay.
And we are quite practical. So lots of the things on the blog is practical. So how to facilitate these situations, these kind of practical tools and things.
Great.
So we can go to the blog there. I think that is a great resource. Also at the moment, I'm reading the book Empowered by Marty Kagan. He's from the SVPG, Silicon Valley Product Group. So at svpg.com. And he makes the distinction between really good kind of agile or product organizations. So compared to many organizations are either kind of sales-led or technology-led, but not really product-led. And they're not really, typical teams are just handed features or tasks to do, not really empowered. So the best tech companies are kind of standing out. So Google, Amazon, Spotify, they kind of have been born as more of a tech companies. So they have this kind of really good, innovative, we talked about Tesla, that approach. And more traditional companies, yeah, they think they have the expert telling people what to do, basically. And one interesting thing is I see that now, since the Agile Manifesto is over 20 years old, you would think that now everyone is Agile. And all companies claim they're Agile. But if you really go under the hood and look, the difference is getting just further and further. So these good, great tech companies, so to say, they are just moving ahead because they're innovating so fast, not only on the product, but they're also innovating kind of on their organization and how they work.
Oh, yeah. Google's writing papers about teams and effective teams, and they're iterating what makes an effective team that's going to collaborate well. And right.
So I think few of the kind of big traditional companies will survive in the long run unless they really change. But now, since they have installed some kind of predefined cookbook recipe and think that they're Agile, it's even they kind of stopping their development a lot.
Anything else you've been listening to or reading or streaming that's caught your eye in recent times? Maybe it could have something to do with Agile or leadership, or maybe it has nothing to do with that. But what's caught your eye that listeners might be interested in?
Well, as I mentioned about the Mark Kagan and Empowered, and I also am really looking forward to next week. I'm going to meet Robert Keegan.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'm going to take the deliberate developmental organization class.
He's going to be in Sweden, isn't he?
Yeah, he's in Stockholm next week.
Yes, so, I saw something about that on social media, I believe.
Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
So I think that is a new approach to actually build learning organizations in practice. And also we talked about the leader versus leadership. So everyone needs to be a leader. So in his book, Everyone Culture, it talks about how to kind of accelerate learning. So that I think is super interesting.
I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes for folks. The Deliberately Developmental Organizations, very interesting book, an interesting way of thinking about, and I think probably a fairly close cousin to some of what we've been discussing today.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? I mean, they're in the same family. Feedback loops and how people are performing and learning and, developing individuals' mental complexity so that they see the organization through a more complex lens versus, exactly. Someone at the imperial stage where it's kind of this, that, right, wrong. I love it.
You have a great speakers. I've listened a couple of I have a lot of episodes to catch up on, but I mean the Deborah Helsing one, she's colleague with Robert Keegan, and I also listened to the Henry Mintzberg and Todd Deal. I think that was very interesting as well. Yeah, so you have a lot of great episodes here, but I think with people might be familiar with adult development and complexity thinking. So yeah, my thesis is that to succeed leading in a complex environment, you need to be have also more complex mind. And I think a key is also creating good leadership teams.
Yep.
So that's kind of a shortcut to if you can tap into the complexity of your colleagues, right, and your leadership team. Well, leadership development is a kind of slow process. So a shortcut is really creating a great leadership team so that you can tap into that complexity thinking.
So well said. So well said. Michael, I have a conversation later today with a couple of colleagues about a paper that we're working on that really is modeled in some ways on Keegan's work in deliberately developmental organizations, but where we're taking the conversation is deliberately developmental degrees. Are we in institutions of higher education or education in general baking in elements that help foster and facilitate, some call it vertical development. Keegan's called it transformational learning. There's different phrasing for it, but are we helping to increase the mental complexity of individuals and creating those habits of mind that get them on the path for that long-term work? Because yes, if we have a team working from Keegan stage 4, the theory would be that we're going to see and have, a different level of understanding about what's happening around us versus a team of people working out of stage 2.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's a fun area to explore. I mean, for
Yeah.
sure. Well, Michael, I really, really appreciate your time today. It's been fun to learn. It's been fun to hear your thinking about this topic and how it's amazing to me. You mentioned the conversation with Todd Deal, where we can take elements and concepts from chemistry and apply them to leadership. And we can take elements from software design and
Yeah.
apply them to leadership. And I think there's so many of those connections. It's just a lot of fun. I look forward to our next conversation when I'm in that national park with you. And I didn't hear any birds today, but we'll have birds.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. You're welcome. Would be great to meet you here
Okay.
in person.
Well, thank you so much, sir. Be well. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Yes. Thanks a lot for having me.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
I have said it before. I'll say it again. I'm continually amazed at how other domains have just incredible clues for us as individuals interested in this thing called leadership, leader development. There's so many wonderful lessons in that conversation, so many direct applications. And I'm also personally beginning to see the convergence of some of these different domains. I don't know that I can put it in words yet. I kind of just see images. And I know that that sounds awkward. It felt awkward to say, but I'm starting to see some things kind of converge in different ways. And that's just a lot of fun. I'm starting to, in some ways, I think, as any great qualitative scholar knows, get to some places of saturation. Enough themes are beginning to emerge in my conversations over the last couple years. I hope you as listeners are experiencing some of those themes emerging as well. As always, Michael, thank you so much for bringing your expertise to that conversation. I am not going to re-emerge the 5 or 6 themes that you spoke of that relate Agile to leadership, but I think there's some just wonderful lessons in that conversation. And can't wait to have that next conversation in the national park in Sweden with the birds chirping. I am looking forward to that day very, very much. As always, everyone, thank you so much for checking in. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for sharing this podcast with others. It means a lot, and we are growing, and that is wonderful, so that we can increase the network of individuals thinking about leadership in new and different ways. Be well. Bye-bye. You have just finished another episode of Practical Wisdom for Leaders with Scott Allen. To contact me, visit scottjallen.net or send me a note at scott@scottjallen.net. I'm also on LinkedIn, so let's connect. If you have feedback, I'd love to hear it. And as always, thank you so much for listening. And now here's my daughter, Emily, with the outro.
You've been listening to Phronesis, Practical Wisdom with Scott Allen.